we'll dive into some news and notes, some rough ones. What do you got for us?
Yeah, the news and notes are entirely revolving around injuries. Two big ones. First, Nate Herbig, starting center, or presumptive starting center coming into camp, has a rotator cuff injury that could potentially leave him out for the remainder of the season. Of course, it is early. There's still time for them to see what's going on, but he is going to be a long-term injury. Meanwhile, Jaylen Warren in the game leaves due to a hamstring injury, expected to miss the next couple of weeks. His status for week one unclear. So two major injuries to the Steelers offense.
Yeah, a massive blow for the Steelers. We'll start with Jaylen Warren. I think that's the one fans will be more concerned with, because while Nate Herbig was the presumptive center or starting center, Zach Frazier was the name everybody was paying attention to. When it comes to Jaylen Warren, if he does miss regular season time, that's a massive blow for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's hope this is something that heals well before week one of the regular season. And I say that only because if you go into week one, hamstring injuries are tough. Anything soft tissue is not the easiest thing to get over. And because of that, the Pittsburgh Steelers could find themselves leaning heavily on Najee Harris. I'll also say this. If Jaylen Warren isn't ready to go by week one, I think you have to keep another running back. And I would take either Jonathan Ward or La'Mical Pirine. I don't care what one it is, but you have to keep one of the two, because you can't walk in there with Najee Harris, a 32, 33-year-old Cordero Patterson, and then nobody else behind him. Even if it's for a week or 2 weeks, doesn't matter. You figure that out to where you probably hope Jaylen comes back. If you don't, that roster spot gets very tricky. I don't know how you go about it, but the Steelers would, in my opinion, have to keep another running back, simply because Cordero Patterson isn't a workhorse running back. You're not going to be able to put him out there 20 times a game and hope that you could get a productive offensive flow out of him. Jaylen Warren is half of your ground game, so you're trying to make up for a significant loss. And you need a real runner, and Pirine and Ward are as close as you get there. So I think you have to keep one of those two. Let's talk about game time. I could still taste the popcorn and the soda and smell the beer of my first Pittsburgh Steelers game. And yeah, the Jacksonville Jaguars might have won that day, but I will never forget how loud Heinz Field was and how rocking that stadium was on the North Shore. Game Time has this new feature called Game Time Picks that makes things like getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I have an upcoming concert in Cleveland the day after the Pittsburgh Steelers play against the Browns, and instead of sitting there clicking on every single section, I'm just going to use Game Time Picks. Let's talk about why it's so great. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. On top of that, you get all-in pricing, which means that you get the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. On top of that, you get seat views, because nobody wants to buy some nosebleed seats for cheap and take a guess on whether you're staring at a pole or you just got the greatest deal in the entire venue. Plus, the lowest price guaranteed, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Game Time ticket coverage means that your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code ALLSTEELERS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code ALLSTEELERS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, low prices, guaranteed. When it comes to Nate Herbig, it's a blow. I mean, Nate Herbig, even if he wasn't going to start this season, is a very good backup. And I didn't have him on my 53-man roster. I think he'll end up on IR, and it sucks that that's the way that his time in Pittsburgh ends. But you look at him and say, what comes next? Is Spencer Anderson good enough to be the backup rotational center? Mason McCormick, is he ready enough? They have names, and good names, granted, but names that aren't a traditional center. I'll ask you this. You think Mason Cole comes back to the Pittsburgh Steelers after the Nate Herbig injury?
Yeah, it certainly gets interesting because coming into this season, when we were looking at the center position, it was, well, Zach Frazier was drafted as a center. And outside of that, you're really transitioning a guy in Nate Herbig who kind of poo-pooed his own ability to play the position last year at one point. So you're saying, all right,
Yes.
you're on a little bit of shaky ground, but Zach Frazier's a guy that they have a lot of faith in, and Nate Herbig is a guy that could be a backup. It might be able to be worked out. But now with Herbig going down and other players that you might have to switch positions with being your backup, I think there is a chance that they look out to get a center. Whether or not Mason Cole ends up being that center is to be determined. But I do think that I'm a little concerned about the fact that their backup center now is going to be another offensive lineman who's switching positions, which has not been a good thing for the Steelers over the last couple of seasons.
No, it really isn't. And that's why I think you could go out and get a guy like Mason Cole. And I mean, nobody wants a reunion. You know, there are certain guys that you're just like, all right, well, let's move on. Mason Cole wasn't good, blah, blah, blah. Mason Cole was a good leader. I think he would welcome an opportunity to be a backup in the NFL. And if you could toss him in there for a game or two on a worst case scenario, you feel okay with it. But to be honest, I would imagine their first belief is Spencer Anderson, and I think we get a lot of Spencer Anderson at center this week, a lot, to see if he's capable of stepping into that role, and if the Steelers have to worry about it elsewhere. This will be a trial run. This will be, can Spencer play center in a pinch? I'm sure we get a bunch of center in the preseason game out of Spencer Anderson as well, and maybe a little bit out of Mason McCormick. They do have a name in Ryan McCollum, but McCollum has played pretty bad this summer, so I don't think that he'll stick around, but it does open the door for that. And it certainly opens the door for a running back 3 in Pittsburgh, and one that they will most likely consider. I think even if Warren's healthy, you have to consider it, just because you can't risk him getting injured and then moving on. I will say this, P. Ryan and Ward, there's a chance you could sneak at least one of them onto the practice squad, and maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers are feeling good enough there to allow that to happen and take that risk, and then they'll move forward.